It should have been a quiet celebration, Meghan Markle's 44th birthday, surrounded by curated well wishes, filtered Instagram posts, and carefully orchestrated media silence. But instead, just as the news cycle began shifting toward tributes and throwback glamour, a video dropped grainy, unedited, and devastatingly personal. Trevor Engelson, the elusive film producer and Meghan's ex-husband, a man who had remained almost religiously silent for over a decade, appeared on screen with a calm, unforced voice sitting in what looked like a modest home office. No flashy lighting, no dramatic soundtrack, just one man speaking plainly about the woman who had once been his wife. And yet his words detonated across the media landscape within hours. "She is the most calculated person I've ever met," Trevor said, pausing deliberately, allowing the weight of the statement to settle. Every move, every friendship, every event, all of it served a goal. A personal brand she was building even before anyone noticed. The video, just under 9 minutes long, wasn't a rant, nor was it filled with bitterness or rage. It was perhaps for that reason even more damaging. It sounded rehearsed, sure, but more like a deposition than a tabloid tirade. Within hours, Trevor Speaks and Meghan Pass trended worldwide. News outlets scrambled to verify the authenticity of the clip, only to find out that it had been quietly posted on a private Patreon account linked to a documentary team working on untold Hollywood stories. The timing was too sharp, too exact to feel accidental. August 4th, Meghan's birthday. But what truly made the video impossible to ignore weren't the opinions, it was the details. Trevor described with unsettling specificity the final 2 years of their marriage, how Meghan allegedly began removing shared photos from her personal social media, how she slowly cut off mutual friends under the guise of reinvention, and how she ultimately gave him what he called an emotional ultimatum: move to Toronto to accommodate her rising role in Suits or accept the inevitable end. "It wasn't dramatic," Trevor said. "She just stopped replying. One day we were married, the next she was someone else entirely." Trevor didn't shout, didn't accuse her of wrongdoing. He simply outlined a pattern, one that began, he suggested, long before Meghan met Prince Harry. "It's not about me anymore," he added. "It's about recognizing the formula and realizing I wasn't the only one it was used on." That sentence sent ripples through the audience. Was Trevor implying that Meghan used the same tactics, emotional distancing, calculated image-building, relationship management, in her current marriage? Social media lit up with speculation memes, timeline dissections. Photos of Meghan and Harry from their early days were reanalyzed for body language clues. Comments under old videos were flooded with fresh doubt, and commentators began whispering what few had dared say publicly. What if this is a pattern, not a one-time fallout? The timing couldn't have been worse for Meghan's image team. In recent months, she had been quietly rebuilding her narrative: soft reappearances at public events, charity moments, controlled press exposure. And now a man she hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade had thrown a wrench into the entire strategy. But the real trouble was still to come. Because Trevor didn't just offer opinions, he offered evidence. And the next wave of leaks, already swirling in online forums and hinted at by entertainment insiders, included email screenshots, personal photographs, and one direct quote from Meghan herself that no amount of PR polish could erase. And that quote, pulled from an old text thread once thought deleted, would become the most dissected sentence of her career. The quote, short and seemingly benign on the surface, hit the internet like a controlled explosion. "To reinvent yourself, you must erase the chapters that no longer serve the story." At first glance, it could have passed as a motivational soundbite, the kind you'd see beneath an Instagram post or tucked into a memoir. But in context tied to a thread of old text messages allegedly sent from Meghan to a close friend during her final months with Trevor, the words took on a different weight. They weren't aspirational, they were strategic, and they framed her divorce not as heartbreak, but as curation. Screenshots from that conversation, now widely circulated by entertainment media and verified by multiple sources with access to Trevor's legal files, showed a version of Meghan that many had suspected, but few had seen: calculating, emotionally distanced, and hyper-focused on trajectory. "I've outgrown the LA Circle," one message read. "Toronto is cleaner, simpler, better for what I need next." Another, "He's kind, but heavy, not part of the vision anymore." If these messages were truly hers, and so far no one from Meghan's camp has denied their authenticity, they paint a portrait far removed from the narrative of a woman devastated by divorce. Instead, they suggest deliberate detachment, a woman pruning her life like a brand strategy deck, cutting away people the way others discard logos that no longer fit the rebrand. Then came the emails, published by a niche Hollywood blog with a reputation for uncovering buried truths. The emails were dated from late 2012, shortly after Meghan landed her recurring role on Suits. In one exchange, she reportedly outlines to her personal assistant a preference for attending media-relevant weddings only, and asks for a short list of stylists who shoot well under paparazzi conditions. In another, she lays out travel arrangements for Trevor, noting that his name should be secondary, not primary, on any guest list documentation. The implication was jarring that even in the early days of her rising fame, Meghan had begun managing not just her image, but everyone within its orbit. But the story's sharpest edge arrived with the resurfacing of details from their wedding in Jamaica, an event long dismissed as carefree and casual. According to guests who attended and photos now verified by multiple sources, the wedding was anything but relaxed. Seating charts were color-coded by profession and media affiliation. Certain guests were briefed not to speak directly to Meghan, unless approached, and Trevor ironically seemed more like a guest of honor than the groom. By now, the media reaction had gone from intrigued to inflamed. Trevor's video, which initially appeared as a one-off confessional, began to look more like the opening shot in a coordinated rollout, or as some speculated, a preemptive strike ahead of something larger. Inside Meghan's team, sources revealed a scramble was already underway. Legal advisors were contacted. Platforms hosting the video received takedown notices. A plan was being developed, equal parts defense and deflection. PR insiders hinted at a new charity announcement, a possible podcast re-release, even a surprise interview if damage escalation continued. But none of it, insiders admitted, was likely to erase the chilling clarity of one specific message, the one line from Meghan herself that critics now tattooed across the digital discourse: he's not part of the vision anymore. And that vision, the one Meghan so meticulously sculpted, was about to face its harshest test, yet as public sympathy, fractured and long silent voices from her past stepped forward with hauntingly familiar patterns. By the end of the week, the internet wasn't just dissecting Trevor Engelson's video, it was dissecting Meghan Markle. Again. But this time the lens had shifted. What began as a single expose about a failed Hollywood marriage was now being reframed through a much wider, more unsettling question. What if Trevor's version wasn't just emotional venting? What if it was a blueprint? Across online forums, long-forgotten anecdotes resurfaced. Former castmates from Suits, once silent, now appeared in shaded podcast quotes and anonymous features describing Meghan's subtle distancing tactics. "She was lovely until you weren't useful anymore," said one former stylist. Then she disappeared. Even family drama, long chalked up to dysfunction and tabloid exaggeration, was pulled back into the spotlight. Half-siblings she'd long disavowed, a father she'd publicly cut off, all re-examined under the same framework Trevor had laid bare: remove what no longer fits the narrative. But the real twist wasn't in the evidence, it was in the emotional response. Because for the first time, even some of Meghan's most loyal defenders paused. A journalist who had previously covered Meghan sympathetically tweeted, "I'm all for reinvention. But if you burn every bridge on your way up, don't act shocked when no one builds you a lifeline later." The post went viral, not because it was harsh, but because it captured what many were beginning to feel: fatigue. Fatigue with the perpetual victim framing, fatigue with polished PR campaigns that didn't align with resurfaced realities, and fatigue with the pattern, one that began in Hollywood, deepened in the royal family, and now seemed to follow Meghan across every chapter. And then came the final push. A clip from a 2016 red carpet interview began circulating. Meghan, when asked about her rise in Suits, smiled and replied, "Sometimes you have to quietly let go of the people who hold you back, even if they loved you once." The audience at the time had applauded. Now in this new context, the same words hit differently, not empowering, but cold. Not resilient, but rehearsed. Still, there were those who defended her fiercely. Fans posted threads analyzing the gendered nature of the backlash, pointing out how male celebrities like George Clooney or Jay-Z had publicly reinvented themselves without similar scrutiny. Why is Meghan expected to stay loyal to every person from every past phase just to prove she's authentic? One user wrote, "Let her grow." But even that defense began to crumble under the weight of one unavoidable detail: the silence from Meghan herself. While Trevor spoke calmly without rancor, while emails and photos leaked in slow, deliberate waves, Meghan's team issued nothing. No denial, no statement, no legal clarification. The absence of rebuttal, so uncharacteristic for a media-savvy team like Archwell, sparked its own speculation. Was she caught off guard, strategizing a response? Or more dangerously, did she know that fighting back might only validate what Trevor had already implied? One former PR consultant for the Sussexes offered a chilling observation. "The worst place for Meghan right now isn't the headlines. It's the gray zone where people stop defending and start doubting. That's when brands bleed." And bleed it did. By the weekend, several prominent lifestyle outlets paused ongoing features tied to Meghan's upcoming ventures. A fashion label quietly removed her from its ambassador list. Even an international nonprofit scheduled to host her at a fall summit cited scheduling realignments and removed her image from promotional material. The shift was subtle but seismic. And while Meghan stayed silent publicly behind the scenes, she was activating every contact, every crisis line, and every tactic in her arsenal, because the next leak would come not from Trevor, but from her own inner circle. The silence couldn't hold. Behind closed doors, Meghan wasn't retreating. She was reacting. As the media storm escalated and former allies fell silent or stepped away altogether, Archewell's West Coast crisis team found themselves on daily calls not with press contacts, but with lawyers. Their task wasn't to issue statements, it was to stop the bleeding. But it wasn't working. Requests to take Trevor's video down were met with polite denials. The platform cited public interest journalism, while Trevor himself, according to insiders, had prepared legal protections well in advance, a move some now see as evidence the release had been strategically timed, perhaps even coordinated, with the knowledge that Meghan's media visibility was set to increase this fall. Still inside her camp, Meghan pushed forward. Plans were set for a back-channel op-ed, a piece that would frame her reinvention journey in empowering language, without addressing the Trevor video directly. A new charity initiative with a women's rights group was pushed forward. Talks of an on-camera appearance brief controlled sympathetic floated among advisors, yet each idea collapsed under the same weight. What if anything we say just fuels the fire? And then the fire moved indoors. On a quiet Wednesday morning, a voice note surfaced not from an ex, not from the press, but from within Meghan's own team. A short, frustrated message from a former Archewell executive forwarded through multiple industry WhatsApp groups before finally hitting the inboxes of key entertainment reporters. She doesn't need help, the voice said. She needs control. If you can't be managed, you're erased. That's the model. The voice wasn't confirmed officially, no name was attached, but it was clear it was recent, and the context left little room for misinterpretation. This wasn't just about Trevor. This was about a pattern now echoed by someone who had worked within the palace of her personal empire. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't past versus present, it was inside versus outside. Media outlets seized the shift immediately. The Daily Telegraph ran the headline, "Is Meghan losing her inner circle?" The Washington Post framed it differently, "When the brand becomes bigger than the person, the risk of the Markle machine." And public response muted but watchful. People weren't shouting anymore, they were listening. Even Trevor, who had remained radio silent since the initial video, was asked for comment through a podcast producer and declined. "I said what I needed to say," he replied. "I hope she finds peace." Yet it was peace Meghan couldn't afford, not yet. Not when the machinery of perception she had so carefully built, the reinvention narrative, the misunderstood woman arc, was cracking from within. One advisor speaking off record to Variety explained it this way: the brand was built on being the outsider wrongly judged. But if insiders are now speaking out, that's existential. And still Meghan hadn't spoken. But she was moving emails sent to talent agents, PR leads, producers. A pivot was in motion. Not a defense, but a full narrative reset. A private call was reportedly held with a high-profile female journalist known for nuanced, empathy-driven interviews. Meghan, according to leaks, was considering something unprecedented, acknowledging imperfection and human ambition without apology. But whether the public would accept that after so much curation was unclear. Because as Meghan prepared to rewrite the story one more time, Trevor's final move, an unreleased podcast recorded months ago, was quietly scheduled for broadcast. And in it, one detail could unravel everything again. The audio began softly, a podcast intro, light jazz in the background, the host's voice calm and practiced. "This episode was recorded in early June," he said before recent developments. "But in light of everything that's happened, we believe the timing is right." And just like that, Trevor Engelson's final move, a pre-recorded interview, kept under wraps until the media storm reached its peak, was out in the world. Unlike the first video, this wasn't confessional. It wasn't an expose either. It was a conversation, one that pulled back the curtain not only on his marriage to Meghan Markle, but on the emotional residue that remained. "I'm not here to villainize her," Trevor said, voice steady, tone even. "We were two people at very different stages of ambition. That's not a crime, but when you build your life with someone who treats every chapter as temporary, eventually you become disposable." He didn't cry, he didn't accuse, but what he offered was something Meghan's silence had perhaps made more powerful context. He described their wedding, their late-night writing sessions in LA, the pride he felt when she landed suits. But he also described the distance, not just physical, but emotional, that crept in. The spreadsheets for media events, the curated circle of friends, the dinner parties where she spoke more like a brand than a partner. "I used to think she was just growing," he said. "Now I think she was curating." The line landed with a soft thud, not dramatic, but devastating in its own way. Meanwhile, Meghan's team, still silent on the audio itself, moved forward with their reset. Her new op-ed was quietly submitted to a legacy magazine now in the editorial queue, A podcast guest spot was under negotiation. PR planners debated whether to use her next public appearance as a reintroduction or a redirection. But the response, even among friendly outlets, was no longer predictable. In a sharp editorial from The Independent, a columnist asked, if Meghan wants us to see her as a multidimensional woman, why does she silence every dimension but the polished one? In contrast, others defended her resilience. A prominent feminist author tweeted, she dared to outgrow men who couldn't keep up, and now she's being punished for not crumbling. The conversation had fractured not just around the facts, but around what those facts meant. Was Meghan ruthless or simply strategic? Emotionally cold or emotionally protected? A manipulator or a survivor of an industry that punishes sentiment? And perhaps most pointedly, if Meghan had applied the same formula to her royal marriage that she allegedly used on Trevor, what does that mean for Prince Harry? Some say she's empowered him, helped him step into a freer, more authentic self. Others now fear he may simply be the latest chapter in a book she plans to keep rewriting. But Meghan herself has yet to answer that question, and maybe she never will. Because this time the battlefield isn't the press or the palace or even a marriage. It's the public memory, and whether it sees her as a woman reinventing herself or one systematically erasing everything that doesn't serve her image. So now the choice falls to you. Is Trevor exposing the truth or bitterly rewriting history? Is Meghan a master manipulator or a woman finally in control of her story?